Good afternoon. My name is Chris Bell. I'm Head of Stakeholder Engagement at SSEN Transmission. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on building a lasting legacy from our Pathway to 2030 projects. If we can just go on to the next one. So I'm just going to go through some housekeeping before we get into the content for this afternoon's session. We're using Teams Live today, so if you join late or you do need to step away for a bit, you can pause and restart. And you'll also be able to use the same link that you've joined with today to rewatch the session. We are recording the webinar and we'll add to the website this week. So if you've got anyone that you know that can't join, they'll still be able to view the webinar this week. We did ask you for some questions to be submitted ahead of the webinar. Thank you for submitting those. We've used those to help shape the content that you'll hear from our presenters today. And any of those that we haven't answered through the content, we will try and cover in the Q&A session that we'll have towards the end of the webinar. The session today will be interactive, so we've got a few questions that we're going to ask you. We'll do that via Slido. So the hashtag is there on the screen if you want to use that just now to join Slido, or you can visit slido.com and use hashtag SENT Legacy 25, and that will let you join and answer the polls that we'll be posing throughout the session today, which our presenters will be highlighting as we go. If you do have additional questions, I will cover that towards the end as well, but there'll be a chance to get in touch with us and we'll share that towards the end of the webinar too. So we've got an exciting and packed agenda for you this afternoon about a wide range of topics about what we're doing to build a lasting legacy from our Pathway to 2030 projects. This is about transparency and collaboration as we all build towards 2030. So you'll hear from several presenters on the session today. I just want to talk you through that just now. First of all, you're going to hear from one of our ASTI project directors, Laurie Kibblewhite. And Laurie's just going to tell us about where we are in terms of our Pathway to 2030 programme and its projects, about some of the work that is already happening on the ground, about why we're doing that and what you might see, and then about what happens next as well. We're then going to hear from our Strategic Workforce Planning Manager, Steph O'Donnell, and Steph's going to focus on jobs and skills. I'm going to talk about our sustainable people strategy and about the skills that we need to deliver on all of our projects. Richard Jennings is our Housing Strategy Manager, and Richard's going to tell us about what we're doing to strategically accommodate the workforce that we need to deliver our projects and do that in a sustainable way. Gary Hughes is our Economic Development Manager, and Gary's going to talk to us about our community benefit funds this afternoon and how we are developing those funds for all of the new projects that we are delivering. And finally, we're going to hear from Katie Andrews, who's our Nature Delivery Officer. Katie's going to talk about the environmental commitments that we've made and how they are being delivered as well. And then finally, I'm going to facilitate the Q&A towards the end of the session. So if we just go on to the next one, please. So I'm sure if you're joining today, you know SSEN Transmission and you know who we are, but just a quick recap in case you don't. So we own and operate the high voltage electricity transmission network in the north of Scotland, and our priority is to provide a safe and reliable supply of electricity to the communities that we supply. In the north of Scotland, we do have vast resources in terms of renewables, and we need to invest in our network to connect this new renewable generation, and that's really driving a lot of the projects and activity that you're going to hear about today. We are a natural monopoly, so we are a regulated business and we're regulated by Ofgem. So if we just go on to the next one. So today we're really going to focus on some of those benefits from our projects. You know, we're proud of the positive contribution that we're already making through our Pathway to 2030 projects. The scale of investment required to deliver these projects is really significant. over £20 billion worth of investment between now and 2030 across a number of onshore and offshore projects. And we want to ensure that the communities close to where this new infrastructure is built and the wider communities in the north of Scotland really see the benefits from this development. So we're committed to ensuring that there really is a long-term legacy. Some of these benefits you're going to hear more about today in terms of that housing strategy, about our community benefit funds, about our approach to jobs and skills, about nature restoration. There's also obviously a significant boost to the economy coming from these projects, £7 billion to the Scottish economy and £3 billion of that in the north of Scotland. Huge number of jobs that will be facilitated through the projects as well. Over 17,500 across Scotland and around half of those in the north of Scotland. And as well as that economic boost, there's also the significant contribution that we're going to make to net zero targets through enabling that renewable energy generation onto our system. And we're also got energy security as well as a benefit as we transition away from some of those more volatile imported sources of generation and transition to homegrown renewables. So I think I'm going to pass over to the first of our presenters today to talk you through our ASTI programme and where we are. So I'm going to pass over to Laurie Kibblewhite.
Thanks, Chris. So if we move to the first slide here. So I thought just to kick us off, I'd give a quick reminder of what our Pathway to 2030 investment programme is. So our 2030 investment programme is required to meet both the Scottish and UK government's net zero and energy security ambitions for 2030. We have 3 of our kind of key investments are already in flight, one of which is in Argyll, another from Fort Augustus to Skye, and then our connection to the Orkney Isles as well. And then we have 8 key ASTI developments, that'll be part of the focus of some of the next slides that I come on to. So 8 projects which are currently in the kind of refinement and development stages, which we are seeking consent for. And I'll go into some of the finer detail on that on the kind of subsequent slides. If you want to go on to the next slide. So since 2022, we've conducted one of the largest consultation exercises in Scottish history as part of our accelerated strategic investment programme, our Pathway to 2030 investment programme. Our last webinar, which was held in February of 2025, was just around the time that we were publishing our reports on consultations following our alignment consultations for our overhead line developments. Since then, we've conducted a further alignment consultation on our Beauly to Peterhead project, and we've started submitting our overhead line consent applications. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll go into a bit more detail about those. So of our projects that are in the development and refinement stages, we have 2 sites that now have planning consent or planning approval in principle. That's our Fort Augustus substation and Netherton hub. We're awaiting planning decisions on the remainder of our substations that are in our refinement and development stages, and we're expecting key decisions to be made on these in the coming months, so in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. In terms of our overhead lines, we've now submitted our Section 37 applications for the Beauly to Spittal overhead line and for the Teeling Kintore overhead line, and our consent application for the Beauly Peterhead circuit is in the process of being uploaded and submitted as we speak. So will be lodged in the kind of coming week. Now there are a number of further applications that are required for enabling works, including access works and modifications to existing assets where we can't keep our modifications within the existing footprints of sites. And wherever we're submitting those applications, they're published on our website. So I'd encourage anybody that has any questions on any specific consents to look at our website. On the next slide. So while we're gearing up to complete our consenting phase and move into construction, there are a number of works that we'll be undertaking. This is primarily to ready ourselves for the construction period and also to prepare our network for what's a major change to our existing operating network. So this includes site survey works. We're conducting ground investigations predominantly on our overhead line infrastructure, and these ground investigations will determine the exact designs for each of the foundations underneath each of our overhead line towers. We're undertaking limited felling works. We're undertaking felling works where we need to fell trees to reach locations to undertake ground investigations within our permitted development rights. We're trying to minimise this wherever we can. So if we have a scenario where we've got an area of woodland with our overhead line, proposed overhead lines running past that area of woodland alongside arable ground, we would choose to go through the arable ground before choosing to do any felling. So we're trying to keep that to an absolute minimum wherever we can. We're undertaking electrical extensions within our existing sites. So within the existing footprint of our existing sites, we're readying those sites for interconnection with what will effectively be a new 400 kV network in the north of Scotland. The first of which of those new Deer substation, the extension work has begun there in the last month. And we're also undertaking a series of advanced procurement exercises to ensure that we're able to secure the plant and equipment we require to develop and build the network for 2030 in what's becoming an increasingly competitive global market for electrical equipment and plant. There's some key activities that we'll be undertaking whilst we're awaiting our kind of key consents to come through from the relevant consenting bodies. So on to the next slide. So alongside that, we've also appointed all of our principal contractors for the works, and our principal contractors have been gearing up to deliver these works. My colleague Steph will talk about skills development on some future slides, and one of the things that we're doing is building our workforce, but our contractors are building their workforces as well to deliver for the works, and also building relationships in the local supply chain. To support them doing that, we've opened a number of project offices across the north of Scotland. These include offices in Aberdeen, Inverness, Peterhead, Elgin, Allness, Stornoway and Stirling. If we move on to the next slide. Now we're settled within the communities, I wanted to just take a moment to make it clear that our commitment to engagement doesn't stop once we have planning consent. SSE's got a strong history with ensuring that we do continue engaging with communities throughout the construction phase of our projects. So a number of commitments we want to make relating to that. So the first of which is we'll have a community liaison manager assigned to each project as part of these 2030 works. This community liaison manager's role is to update the community on our activity and be a central point of contact for community members, and also to take on and coordinate feedback from communities as we're undertaking the works. We're already undertaking a number of Meet the Buyer events, the last of which was held just under 2 weeks ago in Aberdeen. the local supply chain is absolutely critical to us actually delivering these projects. We need people and we need the skills to be able to deliver these works. So whether it's from building contractors, earthworks contractors, through to catering, cleaning contracts, transportation contracts, we're looking to engage with the local supply chain, and our principal contractors have been actively doing so. And that will continue throughout the course of construction. Later in today's presentation, we're going to come on to our regional and local funds, which are aimed at ensuring these projects have a lasting legacy beyond the completion of the projects as well. My colleague Gary will discuss that in some more detail. And we're also building partnerships and building upon partnerships, pre-existing partnerships we have with third sector organisations. This includes in developing our approach to skills development in the north of Scotland, and also our sector leading nature strategy, which Steph and Katie will touch on in more detail later on in the webinar. So I'm going to pass you on now to Steph, who's going to take us on, give us a bit more information about how we're developing our workforce to deliver the jobs.
Thanks, Laurie. So good afternoon. I'm going to give you an update this afternoon on our workforce. Both Chris and Laurie have already painted quite a good picture of the art of opportunity we have ahead of us and what we need to deliver. So in order to deliver that, we need the right people with the right skills, and most importantly, at the right time. So Chris had shared the figure overall that within Scotland, we are looking at 17,500 job opportunities. Laurie's just recently alluded to the fact that that will be across a number of different industries and sectors. For us, it's really important to call out that we are working very closely with our supply chain, and I will talk to that in a moment as well, just about that collaboration on roles. But I think for now that the most important point here is that there are lots of opportunities coming either directly with the transmission operators or as part of our supply chain and wider organisations. So what I'm going to do on the next slide is just talk to you about how we are enabling this within SSE and transmission. And we do that by, we have a people strategy, a sustainable people strategy, in which we are underpinning all of our people activity. So if we could move on to that, thank you. So to deliver and make sure we've got the right people in the right skills and at the right time, we have got 4 people ambitions that again are underpinned in our people strategy. So whilst we're focusing on making sure our people are safe at work, that we've got the right people and the right skills, that we are an inclusive organisation that can engage the wider community and our employees, and that we create opportunities within our organisation for empowered inspirational leaders. We've got a number of different areas we need to focus on to do that across bringing in an early careers talent pipeline, resourcing and those recruitment strategies that we focus on, looking at how we do sustain being an inclusive and diverse organisation, and then where we put the focus on increasing our capability through our learning and talent strategy. But whilst we do all of that, one of the most important things for us is how do we do that within the local communities, and how do we make sure that whatever it is we're doing for our people and locally with our wider stakeholders, that we are doing well whilst doing good. And I will hopefully allude to that through some of the further slides. So that gives you an idea of the opportunities we've got in terms of the number of jobs. This is the kind of focus areas that we're looking to underpin how we do that. And then going into the next slide, we'll just share an example of how we are currently investing in local talent to bridge the talent pipeline that we have. So we have grown significantly in this space over the last 3 to 4 years. We started off in 2021 with only 19 trainees over 3 programmes. Today we have got over 180 trainees across 10 different programmes. Part of that, we partnered, you'll see the logo on the screen here, we partnered with the 5% Club. Now, they are a charitable organisation who we have chosen to work with, and they target us with having 5% of our workforce in earn as you learn roles. So that is what we've put an optimum focus on, and we have focused on switching from graduate programmes to trainees, to apprenticeships, to foundation apprenticeships. So again, there is hopefully an opportunity for a wide range of individuals who wish to apply and work within our sector. We host graduate large-scale recruitment events so that we are able to interact with potential candidates who are due to join our organisation. And we do a number of different work with our employees who are on programme, taking them through programmes over a 3 to 4 year period to help them transition into a role in industry, and then support them when they come off programme going into a substantive role within the organisation. Across all of these programmes, there's a number of different disciplines, from engineering to business to legal and everything else in between. So there really is a lot of opportunities. We actually have our adverts live at the moment for our next year's intake. So those that are due to join us in the summer of 2026 and September 26, those adverts are live on our website at the moment. So please do have a look and encourage those who you think may want to work on one of our trainee programmes or to join a role within the industry. There's an opportunity to do that on our website. If we can move on, I can talk to you now about trying to engage the next generation. So we have got a lot of good opportunities for young individuals to join through a number of different programmes, as I've alluded to, but we need to make sure that we are inspiring the next generation. So we estimate that about 1% of young individuals leaving school actually go on to achieve a career within the energy industry, and that, coupled with skill shortages, ageing workforce that we have already got within our industry, gives us a huge opportunity to make sure that we are targeting primary, secondary and university engagement in a number of different ways. So with us being in industry and not experts in academia, we use couple of external partners in order to support us with this engagement. So we're looking at the work that Laurie has already outlined today. Where is that work happening, and how do we then target local schools within each of those areas to support and to share the opportunities and the career opportunities within our industry? We work with Industrial Cadets, which again is an organisation who supports us engaging primary school students, and how do we tell the story of the opportunities within industry and what we do in an age-appropriate way for those pupils. We then work with an organisation called Powering Futures, who are actually part of curriculum within secondary schools. So that's where we've got the opportunity to target S4 to S6 students, and they can do some modules with mentoring and support from us as an organisation, and that also qualifies towards their qualifications as well. We're doing a lot of work with universities to again talk about the opportunity and the different pathways for people to join. We offer a number of work experience opportunities for individuals, and we plan to continue doing that as we progress through our pathway to 2030. So on the next slide, this will give you an idea of what we're doing for our existing workforce. I've spoken a lot about the trainees and how we're building that talent pipeline and really investing in the next generation of employee. But actually, we really need to look at where are there individuals from other industries who would benefit from moving across, and how do we support them in that transition. So approximately 1 in 4 of our employees have transferred from a high carbon to a low carbon role within our industry, and we've got a number of conversion development programmes that they're able to go through that supports them in their journey to moving across. We are doing, as Chris and Laurie have alluded to, a lot of community engagement. We're trying to do that through the schools, both primary and secondary, and with the local colleges. And then we're also supporting our existing members of staff with how they can build a sustainable career for the future, looking at different career paths and opportunities when they stay with us as an employer or within the industry. So to move on to one of my final slides, we can't go at this alone. So we know that as SSEN Transmission, we cannot tackle the skills shortage, the ageing workforce, deliver everything that we have to that's outlined in our business plans without working with other people. So just to call out a few, and again, I've alluded to some already, but we are in collaboration with our tier 1 supply chain partners. So when we are coming into local schools and to universities and to local community groups, we are looking to have better collaboration and a joined up story across the wider industry about what it means within your local areas. We are seeking the guidance of Skills Development Scotland and DYW, who are supporting us with getting the right information into schools. And we are also looking at how do we share the messages via the influencers of the next generation, which are ultimately the parents and teachers, so that again we can be there to support if anyone needs any guidance or is looking to have a career within industry. So lots of good collaboration going on, but still lots to come as well. And the final point from me, I have given a very brief overview of some of the work we're doing just now. We know that there's a lot more to go after, and I am super keen to hear on your views as to what else can we do. So I've given you an overview as to how we're investing in the next generation, some of the work we're doing that's age appropriate for primary and secondary schools, but ultimately we are looking for your feedback to help us identify other ways that we can attract the next generation of talent and future to our industry. And once that's completed, I will hand you over to Richard, who's going to talk to you next.
Thanks, Steph. So I'm just going to talk through our approach to accommodation of our workforce as part of the ASTI programme. There are a number of reasons why accommodation has become a key part of our overall strategy. And a large part of that is that this is such a large-scale project that we've got a workforce that will peak at nearly 7,000 workers mobilised across rural North Scotland, everywhere from Angus up to Peterhead, across to the Highlands, the Western Isles, and to the far north, which means that typically on a smaller programme, there are a number of accommodation solutions available to you, but at the scale at which we're mobilising here, we're having to think about doing something differently. And not only that, we also recognise that with the investment that we're going to have to make in accommodating the workforce, there are things we can do that will have a bigger and more positive long-term impact. One of the issues that was raised, we're all aware about in rural areas, is the housing crisis. And in rural areas, that's presents itself slightly differently to sort of urban centres. And there is a genuine housing issue in every rural community in which we operate. As well as that, one of the key drivers for doing things differently is the fact that actually temporary accommodation is both expensive and also leaves behind very little once that accommodation has been used. Temporary accommodation will have to form part of our overall strategy, but we don't want to miss this opportunity across the entire programme to kind of do more. So in terms of our housing strategy and what it's all about, as we move on to the next slide, we're doing this in collaboration. So our approach to accommodation is very much in collaboration with our local authorities, social landlords and other relevant stakeholders and partners. Now that includes house builders, that includes community organisations, that includes asset owners. And our aim is to facilitate the delivery of 1,000 new homes through the north of Scotland. In majority of cases, that will be the development of new housing for occupation by our workforce, which will then, on exit, go back into the housing market. And in other areas, it will be unlocking strategic housing land. So, for example, if we can host a temporary accommodation village on a site that has been allocated for housing, we can help to put in the core infrastructure so that when we exit, that land is ready for future development. And I think the key thing here is that we're only here for a short period of time, but that time that we're spending can actually leave behind a really positive legacy. And the key thing as well is understanding, we need to understand and work with partners to understand what the right exit strategy is for the accommodation that they're leaving behind. Within this overall strategy, we're also looking at refurbishment of properties. We're looking at bringing former hotels back into use that require upgrading. We're looking at care homes that can be brought back into use through upgrading. And our use of these properties can help to bring those properties back from a standard which isn't considered to be good enough at the moment to a standard which means they can be let, they can be used for tourist accommodation or for permanent needs in the long term. Our goal within this is to lessen the current housing crisis in northern and rural Scotland and to leave behind a lasting positive legacy. A key part of it is actually focusing on additionality. So in every area that we're working in, we want to bring additionality to what's already been done by local authority and social landlord partners, rather than simply taking the existing supply, using it for our needs and then handing it back. So as we move forward and look at our housing strategy objectives on the next slide, I think it's really key. This is really key to us, is that it's not just about housing as part of a long-term legacy, it's also recognising that quality accommodation really helps us to improve the well-being of our workforce and help to deliver effective and really good quality performance on the ground. So housing as part of an overall accommodation strategy and also improving the quality of the temporary accommodation offer is something that we're doing for our workforce. Where we can contribute to tackling housing challenges in rural Scotland, we're really focusing in on that. And in every different community, those challenges are not the same. So in the Western Isles, for example, we know that there is both a need for social housing, mid-market rent type housing, so discounted for rental properties, and also low-cost home ownership is a really key. So access to market housing in areas where there isn't speculative development is something that we're actually seeking to address through this. So we can work with developers who can bring forward a range of housing options that will mean that on our exit, there will be a number of different housing products available to people locally. And we definitely can't do this without really close collaboration. We ourselves are not going to be the owners of these properties. We're going to be the user of the properties for a period of time, which means we bring quite a lot of funding available to unlock those assets. So we really have to work with existing stakeholders to make sure that the houses that they need in the future are built to their standards and to their needs. And they also are, there is a landlord behind this who will be there for the long term. I think people probably know and understand some of the stories in the past where housing was built for a very short period, was used, but then didn't have a future. Everywhere we're going, these are sites that have been identified in local plans and identified to meet existing need. And one of the key things with the collaboration is that we're looking at sites we can unlock. So there are many housing sites in rural areas that are stuck, partly due to availability of funding, partly due to the cost of delivery, sometimes due to the complex mix of market and social homes and being able to be confident from an investor perspective that you'll actually be able to sell all those homes or you'll be able to rent all those homes. Our short-term use over the next 3, 4, 5 years is allowing all those developers to get them confidence to bring those sites forward. So we're able to accelerate the delivery of rural housing in key areas. I mentioned earlier our workforce, and I think that's a really key driver of this. So in the next slide, it really shows the scale of the opportunity, but also the scale of the challenge. So we will have a peak workforce not far away from 7,000 across the entire programme, spread out throughout the project. Whilst the peak is at 7,000, there is a large proportion of workers that will need to be, so more than 4,000 will need accommodation for 3 years. And as soon as you're looking at the 2,000 level, you're looking at accommodation for 4 years or more. So we have a large part of the workforce that needs long-term accommodation needs. And we recognise that if we were to follow a more traditional approach, which would be to use temporary accommodation solutions, hotels, private rents, short-term lets, then we would have a big detrimental impact on the cost of living for local people and availability of properties, but also on the tourism sector. Because we're not a seasonal workforce, we are there for a long-term duration. So whilst we are using some of those options because they actually work for the local area, we recognise we've got to try and meet as many of the accommodation needs as we can through our own investment. So we'll see this workforce arrive, stay in quality accommodation, and then that quality accommodation having a future use as we go forward. In terms of where we're doing this, the next slide shows the kind of geographical spread of what we are doing. And the two largest areas where we will have workforce are in the Highlands and in Aberdeenshire. In Aberdeenshire, that's concentrated around Netherton Hub, and then in the south of Aberdeenshire with our overhead line and substation work there. And in the Highlands, it's concentrated in and around the Inner Murray Firth, but also a significant workforce will be in the Wick and Thurso area as well. And within each of these different areas, the accommodation solution will be different. So in the northeast of Scotland, there is a large amount of temporary accommodation available because of the history of oil and gas and properties that are actually been designed and built for managing temporary workforce needs. In addition to that, we're working with the local authority to help deliver housing in that area. In the Highlands, there's less of that temporary accommodation available, and so we're working around how we do both permanent housing and temporary worker villages. As you can imagine, in the north of the Highlands, whilst there is a housing need, the size of the workforce there will mean that we'll actually need to have temporary worker accommodation villages in the north, because ultimately we don't want to be building houses that don't have a future use. And in the Western Isles has been really interesting. We've had really positive engagement with the Western Isles Council around how we can support delivery of housing and blend that with investment in the existing infrastructure that they have for accommodation. So that's the broad geographic spread that we have in our area. In terms of how we're going about this and I guess some of the key takeaways in terms of our housing legacy in the next slide, we'll be working with local authorities, local partners for the next 5-6 years and beyond, because we are looking already at the programmes beyond 2030. We're starting to engage now to think about how we address the accommodation needs for the future workforce that we'll need to in Shetland, for example. And we want to keep engaging with key stakeholders to ensure effective placemaking. I think that placemaking part is really key. And placemaking is about making sure that we have a range of accommodation solutions available to meet the different needs of our workforce, because not all of our workforce will be in one place working on a single substation. Many of them are obviously working on the overhead lines and therefore are more transient in nature with the work that they do. But it's also about making sure we have a range of tenures on exit that meet the range of housing needs. we're working very much with local supply chains and workforces where feasible to boost local economies. So we're working with local developers on sites that they own in their area. And it's really one of the key things that we've seen from this is that they're really keen to work with us to make sure they have a viable pipeline of housing options for their workforce to retain that workforce in the future. When we're looking at the work with communities, the key thing here is that our workforce will need to access a range of provision beyond just accommodation. So we're working with local communities to look at leisure facilities, access to care, access to medical facilities, access to catering, etc., and making sure that we are working with local communities to see where we can do that in tandem rather than just bring it in as a separate add-on. And I think it's really important that this 1,000 homes is the start of a commitment to work on one of the key knotty challenges that we have in Scotland, and facilitating the delivery of these 1,000 homes will hopefully go some way towards addressing the housing challenge. So I do have a question for you, and I think this is part of our placemaking approach. For us, it's really important to understand what are the key housing challenges in your local area. And I think that's something that we'd like you to tell us. We can work with the local authorities, but actually getting your perspective from the area you live in, you work in, I think is really key. So I'll leave it with that question, and once we're done, we'll be handing over to Gary, who'll be talking through our approach to community funds.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Hughes. I'm the Economic Development Manager at SSEN Transmission, and I'll be talking this afternoon about community benefit funds. Now, a lot of communities are used to community benefit funds because they've been around in the wind farm sector for some time, and a lot of the areas where we're working do have wind farms. But the expectation from communities is much wider than that now. So for many large developments, the communities are often looking for some benefits that will be for them, whether that's a housing estate or new grid infrastructure. And up until fairly recently, we as a grid business were unable to offer a community benefit fund. But that's changed, and now we're in a different position. One of the reasons why it changed was it was recognized that it was taking too long to build new grid infrastructure. So it was taking 14 years from identifying a need to actually getting the infrastructure built. So a report was commissioned, and a number of recommendations came out that associated with communities. The first one was a bill discount scheme. So that's currently going through through UK Parliament, and it's set to be, I think, £250 a year for 10 years. The other recommendation was for a generous community benefit fund scheme for communities. So with that in mind, the UK government published guidance on the 10th of March of this year for all transmission operators across the UK. And we will be working with that guidance to deliver this funding. Now, the guidance specifies a number of things. It looks very much at ensuring communities are involved in designing that fund. And it also uses a formula to work out the value of the funding. So it's £200,000 per kilometre of overhead line and £530,000 for every substation or switching station or converter station that we build. And if you look at the projects on the map there, these are the ones that Laurie was talking about, the kind of big grid projects. We estimate that will be worth over £100 million just for those projects. So £100 million will be coming direct to communities for community projects. In actual fact, it will be more than £100 million because we know that many generators, energy generators, hydro or wind farms, want to connect to the grid. And the guidance covers every new piece of infrastructure. So every time we build a new piece of overhead line or a new substation, there will be funding associated with that. Now, this is fairly new for us, but within SSE Group, we do have an experienced team, a community investment team that has been dealing with community benefit funds for a number of years. So we'll be using them to help us with this fund. We'll be administering it ourselves, but we'll be using some of the principles that have been developed by the community investment team, and we'll be using the guidance. So some of those principles include, it's very important that we have independent decision making. So, we're not deciding as a business which projects to fund. We'll be relying on people in the community to make those decisions. We want the funds to be flexible, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're not coming along with this is how it's going to work. There's co-creation, so that we consult with the communities on the best way to use these funds. We need to make sure everything is transparent and open, but we also need to ensure there's good governance. So we're demonstrating, these are projects that are deliverable and they offer value for money. We carried out a public consultation in 2023, and we tested some of these ideas before this government guidance came out. Fortunately for us, the approach that we've taken is in alignment with the government guidance. And I want to talk now a bit about how that approach works. Next slide, please. So following that consultation, the approach we've taken is to split the funding into two types of fund. So the regional fund is open for any not-for-profit organisation to access funding for what we describe as the wider impact, perhaps more transformational projects. This fund is actually open now. It's open until the 19th of November. And it's the second round of funding for this fund. So it's £2 million. We do expect that to increase over the coming years. And we can fund projects with money from a minimum of £40,000 to up to £500,000 towards projects. And there are three themes that we identified, partly through research and partly through that public consultation 2 years ago. So the themes are around kind of skills and training, place and culture, and a new one which we included following that public consultation was to use the funding to seek to alleviate fuel poverty. We recognise it's a major problem in the area where we work. We have an independent panel that's already been set up, chaired by Peter Peacock, ex-Scottish Government Minister, and that panel read through the applications and they seek to select projects that have the biggest impact for those themes and provide best kind of value for money. Now we awarded round one, so we can move on to the next slide, please. We awarded the round one awards earlier this year, and demand was really high for this fund. It was the first year, obviously, that we launched it, and we had over 300 applications requesting almost £50 million. So we know there's a huge demand out there, partly because we're no longer in the EU and that source of funding has dried up, but also public funds, that the funding there is often ring-fenced or needs to be used in a particular way. So a huge demand for this type of funding, and our panel were able to select 10 projects. So the 10 projects go across the three themes, and they also represent a good geographic spread across our license area. You can find out more information about these awards and the projects that are currently underway on our website. So that's the regional fund. If we move on to the local fund now. The local funds are specifically for communities close to infrastructure, to new infrastructure. We don't say this is close and this isn't. What we do, we consult with communities to identify the areas. We've recently been in Argyll, speaking to people there, speaking to the community council, to the local authority. And this consultation is really important. Not only is it in the guidance, but we really want local people to feel empowered that this is their money and it's not us coming in trying to do certain things. For this reason, the approach will vary from local fund to local fund. Each one will be different. We have tested some of these local funds prior to the guidance coming out. So the business committed £10 million to kind of launch early with its community benefit funding. And if you look at the areas where we have local funds at the moment or finished, each approach has been very different, whether that's a kind of one-off small amount, light touch, or whether we're working directly with a third party like development trust to deliver it. We're very much open to different types of funding schemes. The funding is available for each separate station and each bit of overhead line, but the nature of our work means these are connected. So what we intend to do as a starting point is to combine all these little bits of fund into one local fund. And for Argyll, which is the first local fund that we have under the new guidance, that meant we're starting with £3.2 million. So a huge opportunity for this area. And we've been speaking to the community about what the priorities of this fund should be. And we're still working on that. So if any of you are in the Argyll area, please go to our website and there's an opportunity to feedback. Now, we recognise that different communities are in different stages of ambition and organisation. I'll come back to community capacity building in a moment, but it's something we are very keen on to support those communities that perhaps don't have structures in place that allow them to access these funds. Next slide, please. I want to give a couple of examples of things that were funded. So the local fund, as I say, we don't select the priorities. We consult and we listen to people. We look at the action plans, and we recently had a local fund on the east coast of Scotland where health and well-being was identified as a key priority. This was a relatively small fund of £250,000, but it was available across a fairly lengthy line. It was a line that was being upgraded. So following that consultation and research, we were able to make awards to do with health and well-being, and we awarded over 60 organisations sums up to £5,000. And the slide here is just one example. It's a charity in Perth and Kinross that was able to buy some sports equipment to allow people to access some new sports. For the regional case study, I'm actually going to hand over for a video. So it's just a short video, 2 minutes, and it demonstrates one of the projects that we funded with our regional fund.
Face Roche was founded in 1986, and we provide transformative opportunities for people of all ages to participate in traditional music and Gaelic language and cultural activities. We were delighted to receive funding from the Transmission Regional Fund, and particularly that it's multi-year funding and it's towards our core work, which is really transformational for us as a small arts organisation in the Highlands. It's not been an easy time for the arts in Scotland for the last 7 or 8 years, as many people will know, so to have this opportunity to be able to deliver our programme of work and to deliver it to more people and for more people to be able to access and benefit traditional music is just a really wonderful thing. So the funding is supporting us to deliver 6 strands of work. We have a really clear ladder of progression for people, including our weekly classes programme, our school performance group, the Kilturn Fiddlers, our residential courses that we run during the school holidays, our trail which we're running in Cromarty this week, and also a CPD and training element for our musicians. We work with around 180 freelance musicians in a year, and we always offer them training opportunities and upskilling opportunities as well.
Face Roche is the reason that I'm a traditional musician and that I love traditional music so much. Incredible experience and as a kid, and a really good way to get the joy of playing music and the joy of sharing music with other people and learning. Probably impossible to overstate the value that Féis Ross has for Gaelic and for traditional music and keeping the tradition alive.
Levy Gal Parsons the Haley Trail ha mir jaintig in Unit Skillen mean open Marvuyan route nach Romir Vigenef Moran Ronna Shaw agus a click clori danya ela halish and in girl or some kjol I get Dennis Sonna.
So I mentioned earlier about the community capacity building. It is something that's really important to us, and we want to ensure that all communities can access this funding. So I've got a question here that asks about what your community would need in order to access money, and maybe your community is mature in that it's got an action plan, there's a vision, there's development trusts, but perhaps your community doesn't have that in place. So I'm really keen to hear from you about what would help your community or your organization access this funding. So that question will be available for a while, and I will hand over to Katie now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much, Gary. My name is Katie Andrews. There we go, just checking I am off mute. I am one of the nature delivery officers at SSEN Transmission and work across our Pathway to 2030 portfolio to deliver against our biodiversity and nature commitments. Today, I'm thrilled to share how we're working to deliver a lasting environmental legacy, one that not only protects and restores nature, but also supports biodiversity and builds meaningful partnerships across Scotland. This work is not just about infrastructure, it's about shaping a future where nature and communities thrive together. So in this section, I'll cover what our nature strategy is all about, delve into what biodiversity net gain is and how we're approaching it within the transmission business, and finish off with outlining some exciting partnerships which are helping us to deliver meaningful nature and biodiversity protection and restoration in the north of Scotland. So this strategy has been built around two key goals, and that's protecting nature and restoring nature. It aims to connect to best practice and the latest science to take a nature positive approach. So in terms of protecting nature, we want to work with other transmission operators to assess impacts on our environment from materials and construction methods. And by 2030, we aim to have a natural capital considered in every design and development decision. Additionally, we are committing to safeguarding irreplaceable habitats. So these are habitats which are technically very difficult or impossible to restore, recreate, or replace once destroyed. We class these as ancient woodland, which is on the ancient woodland inventory as 1A or 2A. Raised and blanket bog, which we classify on a walkover survey as being in moderate or good condition, and also ancient and veteran trees. So we aim to do this by following the mitigation hierarchy as laid out in the National Planning Framework 4, and that is avoid, minimise, restore, and as a last resort, offset. Also to note, it is with our forestry team, we are ensuring no net loss of woodland through our compensatory planting procedures. On the restoration side, we are committed to delivering at least 10% biodiversity net gain. I'll touch on what this means later in my section, and also becoming industry leaders in marine habitat monitoring and restoration. We're also addressing legacy issues by assessing and remediating contaminated land sites through detailed site surveys. Our plan, as Laurie touched on earlier, is to invest over 100 million in biodiversity restoration by 2033 as part of the wider 22 billion investment in Scotland's electricity transmission network. This would make SSEN Transmission Scotland's single largest investor in nature restoration, which definitely helps me get out of bed in the morning. But what is biodiversity net gain? And the next slide will detail the key steps to approaching it. So biodiversity net gain is a practical way to ensure that our developments leave nature better than before any construction or development was in place. It is a process that's already written into planning policy in England, and SSEN Transmission are working to deliver it in a Scottish context to help us deliver measurable improvements as per National Planning Framework for policy. In terms of how SSEN Transmission are approaching it, we've mirrored the approach taken in England by using a metric to quantify the biodiversity value of habitats on our project sites and or on our overhead line corridor footprints, and the predicted post-construction biodiversity value. So we start by measuring the baseline biodiversity of our project site. This is achieved by undertaking a site survey by our expert environmental consultants. They will identify the different habitats along our project footprint, and each habitat parcel is then entered into our biodiversity projects toolkit, which is adapted from the DEFRA biodiversity metric version 3.1, and this has been adapted for a Scottish context. Each habitat is given a baseline biodiversity value based on a number of factors, including the condition of that habitat and its importance to the local and national ecosystem. Then we identify what will happen during the development of the project, whether the baseline habitat is to be retained or whether it will be removed. Finally, based on our infrastructure plans, the predicted biodiversity after development is completed and is inputted into the toolkit. This allows the area of habitat to be created or enhanced, and it adds in some risk factors, including the difficulty of achieving that specific habitat and the time to target condition. It also includes a spatial multiplier, so whether we're looking to compensate within the local planning authority. The difference between the baseline and the post-development is presented in a dashboard, and this helps guide our actions, whether we are achieving 10% net gain commitments on site or whether we need to seek off-site solutions. This approach allows us to demonstrate we are delivering a positive outcome for biodiversity. And on the next slide, I'll talk about how we are starting to deliver against our commitments by partnering with nature experts. So partnerships are central to our approach. We believe partnering with nature experts is key to ensuring that we have a lasting positive environmental legacy. An example is to support one of our biodiversity commitments on our Sloy Windy Hill overhead line project. We partnered with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, or RSPB for short, a charity which is focused on the conservation of birds and nature. This collaboration will help RSPB deliver 218 hectares of habitat restoration on their Inversnaid Nature Reserve in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. Over the next decade, we'll help manage wild herbivores and enhance habitat diversity, including the rare Atlantic oak woodland, and support species like the black grouse, golden eagle, and the yellow-ringed carpet moth. This specific example shows how we're linking up our project requirements with local restoration opportunities. So as well as project-specific partnerships, we're also looking at strategic partners to deliver large landscape-scale projects, as I'll discuss on my next slide. So we're proud to be the first energy company to partner with Scotland Big Picture. Scotland the Big Picture is a charity working to make rewilding happen across Scotland as a solution to the growing climate and biodiversity crises. Their team works across the country to drive large-scale nature restoration and does so through storytelling. So if you go onto their website, they've got a number of fantastic videos, including the Why Not Scotland video, which helps demonstrate the action that's needed in our local environment. They plan to deliver nature restoration through their Northwoods rewilding network, a Scotland-wide chain of land holdings. This includes Crofts, farms and community woodlands. They're nearly all under 1,000 acres and 1 in 5 is community owned. So I'll now let the nature experts speak. So I've got a nice short video to play that details our partnership with Scotland Big Picture.
Thanks to their amazing filmmaking and some of the really impressive things that they've put out. They really align with our goals because our network fits exactly where their Northwards Rewilding network is, and we think it's really important to work with the nature restoration experts in Scotland and bring together the small landholders, communities and the people working on the ground in nature, and that's who Scotland Big Picture can bring together for us.
Scotland Big Picture are a rewilding charity based in Scotland. We would like to see healthy ecosystems for the benefit of people, nature and the climate.
Scotland faces a unique challenge of being one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, and rewilding provides a solution to face that challenge.
Northwards Rewilding Network is a network of farms, crofts and community woodlands throughout Scotland, between 50 acres and 1,000 acres, where the landowners are all committed to nature recovery.
The partnership will benefit local communities because Scotland Big Picture's Northwards Rewilding Network is made up of those local communities. It's a really good way for us at SSEN Transmission to engage with them in a really meaningful way.
If nature recovery is going to work, it's absolutely critical that people can also make a living. Providing employment and supporting communities is central to the kind of rewilding that we want to see.
While SSEN Transmission is building our network for net zero with the pathway to 2030, it's so important that we take into account the environment and nature along the way. This partnership is one of the many ways in which we can deliver a really positive outcome for nature as a result of us building the network for net zero.
SSEN Transmission are a great fit for a partner. We saw a real opportunity for us wanting to do nature restoration on the ground and for SSEN's work. So we were really aligned in location and values. I hope that through partnerships like this, we'll see a pathway for change.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So I'll finish up there, but I've got a quick question that I would love to ask the attendees today. We're really keen on understanding what is locally important to yourself. So broaching the question, which nature restoration efforts do you believe are most important in your area and why? If you can include your area and region into the Slido answer, as that is anonymous, that would be great, and we'll try and feed that into some of the opportunities that we're exploring on the ground. Thank you so much. I'll now pass on to Chris.
Thanks, Katie. Before we go into the Q&A, I just wanted to speak quickly about volunteering. So we just go on to the next slide. So volunteering has been part of the SSE Group's commitment to giving back to communities for a number of years, and it's critical in SSE Transmission as well that we play our part and support a number of local projects through our people volunteering. We want to work closely with the communities close to where our infrastructure is to identify the right opportunities to support some great initiatives with providing some people power to help with that. So really looking for anyone who is on the webinar today and is maybe part of a community group or a charity, or you're aware of a project that could really benefit from having volunteers from our organisation come and help. That might be a beach clean, it might be tree planting, it could be a community garden, it could be a number of different projects. So if you've got an idea, then please get in touch. We've got another QR code on the screen there, so that will take you straight through to the volunteering section on our website. There's a link on the bottom of this page as well, so please get in touch, and one of our team will get back to you, and hopefully we can provide some people who can help to make some community projects move forwards. So hopefully we hear from a few of you on the back of that. Thank you. If we move on to the next slide. So we're now just going to cover some questions. Some of the questions that were pre-submitted ahead of the webinar were hopefully covered in the content that you've heard from our presenters today, but we'll try and cover some of the other questions that we've received in this Q&A section. So I'll be calling on some of my fellow presenters to help to answer these. If we can just go back to the previous slide. So we have, we've got a number of questions that we'll try and cover just now. So I'm going to come to you first, Laurie. Got a question about timetables in our projects, and you touched on that during your presentation, but the question we've had is that sometimes timelines are missed in terms of projects. The question is, when do we realistically think that we'll have agreements in place with landowners, submit our Section 37 applications, and work will actually start to happen on the ground? I know that will vary across projects, but could you maybe give us a bit of an answer on that, please?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Chris. So given we're at a stage where we're submitting our final Section 37 application on the Beauty Peterhead scheme as we speak, and we have now submitted our Section 37 applications for the Teeling to Kintore circuit and also our Beauty to Spittal circuit. We are into a kind of fairly well described time period for that consent. So we have a commitment from the Energy Consents Unit and Scottish Government around a 52-week determination period, which is what our projects have based their timelines upon. In terms of our way leaves, voluntary way leave notices have been, voluntary way leave agreements have been issued to the majority of landowners now, and we should complete that process in the coming weeks. And a number of which have already actually been agreed and signed off. So I suppose to get to the crux of the question, we're confident that our substation sites will commence construction next year. Now we're starting to receive our planning consents in Netherton, Fort Augustus, and hopefully in some of our other sites that I listed earlier later this year and early next. So once we get consent for our substations, we aim to discharge our conditions in 3 to 6 months. And then for our overhead line works, we're expecting that 52-week period to run, and then a period of time for us to discharge any planning conditions that come off our overhead line applications, allowing us to commence works in early 2027.
Great, thanks for that, Laurie. I'm going to come to you now, Steph. We've got a question which is around skills. So someone's asked, in terms of job creation and skills development, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that local talent and the youth get priority in recruitment and training?
Excellent. No, thank you. So I shared as part of my update earlier that we have typically focused on the graduate population in the past, only having a small number of pipeline programmes. We've now expanded that to over 10, which opens up wider opportunities for more local, and again probably targeting more that school leaver population. There absolutely is still graduate programmes that we have and across multiple disciplines, but we are looking more at how do we have more inclusive offerings for local individuals. Some of the work we're doing with the schools, we've recently launched a new programme called Discovery Days, and that is where we are offering out any school pupils across Scotland that can apply to be part of these Discovery Days. They come and join us at one of our sites for 3 days. They network with a lot of our employees, they speak to some of our existing trainees, and they understand more about the opportunity. And on the back of that, for anyone who wants, there's an opportunity to come and do work experience in one of the areas or multiple areas. And then again, we talk to them about how they apply for roles and how we support them with doing that through uploading their CV and looking at the different qualifications and skills and how we best support them through that application process. So that's something that's already in place at the moment, and we will continue to offer that.
Great, thanks, Steph. That all sounds excellent. I'm just going to come to Richard now. We've had a question relating to housing. Someone's asking, how can local communities work with SSEN Transmission to promote housing developments in their area?
Yeah, so we've actually been working around sites that are promoted. So the key thing, I think, is promoting your site through the local authorities planning process. And if it's a site that's being promoted and therefore is captured either in the future land supply, then it will have been brought to our attention. And if it has been brought to our attention, then please do reach out. We can provide contact details or send your details to us, and we can get in touch to discuss whether the site is within our kind of workforce accommodation needs. So yeah, please do get in touch. But the main thing, I think, is to make sure that sites are promoted through the call of sites by local authorities.
Thanks, Richard, and we've got some ways to get in touch coming up before the end of the webinar. Gary, I'm going to come to you next. So we've got a question relating to legacy, but does reference community funds. So the question is, how does SSEN Transmission ensure that legacy initiatives such as community funds and biodiversity net gain remain sustainable and impactful in the long term, even after project completion?
Yep, that's a good question. Certainly for the regional fund, our independent panel are very focused on that. They're looking for long-term impact. So it's at the forefront of their mind when they're reviewing applications. I guess to a certain extent, we are reliant on those good quality applications coming forward that do address long-term sustainability. But from what I've seen in the last 12 months, I don't think there's any issue there. So certainly our regional panel, it's within their terms of reference. They're looking for good outcomes and long-term legacy. With the local funds, I mean, it's not up to us to decide which projects get funded, but having spoken to local people, they recognise that this is perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hundreds of millions of pounds coming into communities, so they want to make the most of it. They want investment in their communities to keep giving benefits. So although we don't really have any control over what projects get funded by the local fund, I'm confident that whatever panels are appointed, and that will be through an open recruitment process, whatever panels are appointed will be looking for long-lasting legacy outcomes from the projects that they fund.
Thanks, Gary. And got a question for Katie now. Someone's asking, what monitoring and reporting frameworks are you adopting to measure the real impact of biodiversity net gain and nature positive approaches across transmission projects?
Thanks, Chris. And again, a really, really good question, and something we're committed to as part of delivering our nature strategy. And I suppose it follows on from the question that you asked, Gary, just there around legacy. So there's two aspects to this. There's our on-site delivery, which is done through our operations colleagues, and then our off-site delivery, which is through our partners. I'll touch on on-site monitoring first. So our operations team is currently updating our guidance and the way we manage our natural assets. So as part of that planning process, and when we submit our consent, we submit a habitat management plan for our project sites and how basically these habitats will be restored and delivered over the lifetime of the asset. In terms of biodiversity, we're committed to managing these habitats for at least 30 years to ensure that the habitat reaches its full potential. And as I said previously, we're really keen for that to be built on evidence from other areas and work with local planning authorities. We also, in terms of that reporting, we report yearly to Ofgem to demonstrate we are delivering our 10% biodiversity net gain commitments, and also sort of our projects are included in our sustainability action plan. In terms of that offsite monitoring, so as part of the offsite biodiversity net gain delivery, we're going to work really closely with our partners to develop these landscape management plans. So similar to our on-site, these plans set out the monitoring schedule, and methodologies will be tailored for specific habitats to be created or enhanced. So in line with biodiversity net gain guidance, we are committed to monitoring offsite habitats for at least 30 years, again, with monitoring intervals adapted to habitat type and restoration goals. So this is part of the reason why we have partnered with the likes of Scotland The Big Picture and RSPB, who have a proven track record in long-term land stewardship. So these collaborations ensure that monitoring will be robust, independent, and aligned with best practice. So hopefully through these partnerships, we'll really be able to align sort of insights from monitoring to inform adaptive management as well. So that will ensure that we are delivering that legacy on our sites and also through our offsite partners as well.
Thanks, Katie. Next question is in relation to property values, and I'll answer this one myself. Someone was asking if we'll compensate homeowners who have their properties potentially devalued or made unsellable by the work that we are doing. So first of all, we understand that people have concerns about the potential impact from our proposed developments on their properties. Throughout the development of our projects, we've looked to mitigate any impacts on residential properties as far as possible, and these impacts are assessed as part of the environmental impact assessment, which accompanies the applications for consent for all of our projects. If you've got concerns in relation to impacts on your property, you can raise that with our land team or our wider project teams. We are a regulated business, so we are obliged to follow a statutory legal process, legal framework under the Electricity and Land Compensation Acts. So if you're entitled to compensation under this framework, we'll assess this on a case-by-case basis. So you can get in touch, but it is driven by this legal framework that binds us. Okay, I'm going to come back to you now, Laurie. You did touch on way leaves in the first question that you were answering there, but someone is just again asking around about the way leave process, and they're asking if there's been limited correspondence about what's actually happening regarding where roads and infrastructure will be growing. How do we expect them to sign the way leaves?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Chris. Obviously, I can't kind of comment on any specific way leaves that this question's maybe resulted from. But what I would encourage is anyone who believes that their property is going to host our infrastructure, that our land manager details are on our website for each of our schemes, so they can contact them directly, as you should have been they should have been in contact with you by now. We've had a fairly extensive consultation process with landowners since our early routing stages on these projects. So if you were expecting to have heard from us and you haven't, we've got the exact personnel for each of the individual overhead line projects details on our website, and it's not a general mailbox, it's the actual kind of land manager responsible for the scheme.
Great, thank you, Laurie. Steph, I'm going to come back to you. Got another question in relation to skills and recruitment, really. So the person's asked, considering the global push towards HVDC transmission and renewable integration, Are we open to offering opportunities such as knowledge exchange or consultancy or internships for engineers from other countries?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we are looking at all of the roles and the skill sets that we need and growing and attracting that from a number of different places, one of which is building our own talent pipeline through the early careers programmes. And absolutely, we do already have a good proportion of our workforce who are skilled workers and who are joining us and supporting with all of that, and a lot of that is within our engineering space at the moment. So we obviously work with all of the government guidelines around sponsorship opportunities, and we do have employees already employed by us, that can support with all of that, and that will remain.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Gary, I'm going to come back to you now. Got a question here in reference to local benefits. So someone is asking, can you define your reference to local benefits in respect of we're a retired couple hosting infrastructure in the immediate vicinity of where we live. We don't use local amenities and we want to enjoy unspoilt countryside.
Yep, I mean, I don't know which local projects are going to be funded, and not every community project will directly benefit every resident or nearby resident. But there'll almost certainly be a number of indirect benefits, whether that's access to green spaces or youth activities that reduce antisocial behaviour. And I guess I think where possible, where someone's health is fine, I'd very much encourage retired people to get involved in their community and their project. There's a lot of research that shows social contact brings a lot of positive health outcomes. So yeah, absolutely, there will be some people that don't feel they have a direct benefit, but I'm sure there'll be lots of indirect benefits for the whole community. £100 million going into these communities across Scotland will have a definite significant impact.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And I think this is probably going to be the last question. We're running out of time, and I'll pick up this one myself as well. I've got someone who's asking about energy bills. They've asked how much our pathway to 2030 will add to energy bills with some of the UK's highest tariffs here, and what you're doing to help alleviate fuel poverty. I think what I'd say in that is, in terms of the impact on bills, we recognise that part of your bill is made up from costs associated with investing in the GP transmission system, including our own investment in the north of Scotland. And this will increase over the next 5-year business planning cycle. Our regulator, Ofgem, will give their final determination on our 5-year business plans in December, and we'll be able to confirm what that bill impact will be from that part of the bill. But that only tells one part of the story. This investment is contributing to an overall reduction in energy bills, because more increased grid capacity alleviates the need for any constraint payments to go to generators. It allows us to bring more renewable energy, homegrown renewable energy onto the system. We can move away from utilising more volatile priced imported gas for energy production. And it also gives us energy security and contributes towards our net zero targets. In terms of fuel poverty, we definitely recognise that there's still areas across our network where there are significant levels of fuel poverty. You heard Gary reference this earlier, and we've identified this as one of the 3 key focus areas for our regional community benefit fund, and we expect a number of projects which will help to alleviate fuel poverty to be funded through the latest regional community benefit fund round, which is open just now. Okay, I think that concludes the Q&A section of the webinar today, so if we can just go on to the next slide. If you want to find out more, obviously the best resource is our website. You can go straight to our project pages via the QR code on the screen just now as well. As has been referenced in a couple of the presentations today, we've got project specific contact details in terms of community liaison managers, in terms of the land managers that are attached to each of our projects. So please to go onto the website if you've got project specific questions, and you can get in touch. If you've got wider questions, then there's a email address on the slide there that you can get in contact with. So I would encourage you to do that too. If we just go on to the next slide. So we really want to get your feedback on today's webinar as well. It helps us to improve as we look to other future events. Last QR code of the day, there's been a few, but you can access the QR codes by going viewing the recording. But this QR code here will take you to our feedback form for today's event. We would like to hear what you think of it. If there's any improvements you'd like to suggest, please do so. If there's any future topics that you'd like us to cover in future webinars, then please let us know as well. So I would encourage you to fill out the feedback form, please. We'll also be in contact with everyone who was registered for the webinar today with the feedback form and other important links. So I think all that is left is for me to thank everyone who's joined the webinar today. Thank you for taking the time out and for listening to our presentations. Hopefully you found it informative and helpful. Thank you to all my fellow presenters for the content that they've talked about today. And we look forward to speaking to you on a future webinar very soon. Have a good evening and goodbye. Thank you.